Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been so busy in between trips to the US and all over the place. And we're just really happy that you've been able to join us because A, it's Pride, and also we are wanting to continue the conversation around all things conception and different ways to build a family.
Mhm.
So that's why we're really happy that you've been able to join us.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
for those people who are watching who aren't aware of Mike and what he does, I've just got a bit of an introduction. So here we go. To mark Pride Month, but also continue our conversation around alternative conception and ways to build a family, we're catching up with Mike, who is one half of Two Dads UK. He and his husband Wes have three children, and over the years they've worked hard to help other same-sex families. So they've set up the Modern Family Show, which is the UK's only parenting event of its kind, I believe, Mike.
Correct.
And I know it's the only one aimed at the LGBTQ community. And you've also founded My Surrogacy Journey,
Correct.
which is a support organisation aimed at helping both intended parents and gestational surrogates as well.
Correct.
So clearly a busy guy. We're super pleased to have you here. And yeah, we just want to have a chat to you about more about the journey that you've undergone yourself to get you to this point.
Mhm.
So do you want to start by telling us what inspired you to set up Two Dads UK in the first place?
Sure. So thank you, by the way. So me and Wes, we met 10 years ago. We met at Pride in Birmingham. We live in Worcestershire. And I always wanted to be a parent, always wanted desperate to be a dad. And when I met Wes, he was single and had a 7-year-old daughter from a previous straight relationship. And I loved that. And I was single and we got to know each other. And quite quickly and quite early on, I made it quite known that I wanted to eventually be a parent. And it was really important to me that the person I was with wanted that, because my previous relationship didn't. And I wanted to make sure that, time was spent wisely and that I could achieve what I wanted to achieve and raise children with someone that wanted them as well. So we decided to embark on surrogacy, and we have two children, Tallulah, who's 5, and Duke, who's 2, through the help of our incredible surrogate, Caroline, and we had 2 separate egg donors. But what was quite clear when we began our journey was the lack of support. The healthcare system wasn't equipped for gay people having children through surrogacy in the NHS. People didn't understand surrogacy generally, so we had to spend a lot of time educating people, and that's fine. But it was obvious that there was a big piece of work to do around the law and around policy. So we set up Two Dads UK to do that. And it just went off like a bit of a rocket, really, and supporting initially gay men who wanted family through surrogacy, and then it just evolved and grew legs.
So you were the pioneers, really.
That's lovely to say. I think what me and Wes are really good at is that when someone says to us, no, that's not possible, we're like, well, hang on a minute, let's just look at that. How can we make this work? And that's what we like to try and do. And we've all got to use our platform as best as we can to make change, in my opinion. So that's what we did, and that's where it went.
Amazing. So obviously you started your account and then it went from there. But how on earth did you start like your journey? As you just said, there wasn't much about social media probably wasn't as prominent as it is now.
No.
So how did you begin your research and know where to begin?
I guess like most people initially start to when they're having fertility treatment, and I dived into Google, and that was a mistake because it was worrying, and there was all sorts of stories and misconceptions and surrogacy stories that weren't realistic, and we made a lot of mistakes. So trying to find the right clinic, trying to look at how you find a surrogate or an egg donor. So the support was really lacking because the organisation that existed back then were quite limited. So there was only really 3 organisations that existed that can support a surrogacy journey, but none of them were accepting new intended parents. So that meant we had to go about this alone and do what's called an independent journey, and that means we just muddle our way through on our own with very limited support, and that's what we did, and that's why we realized there were several gaps there that where we fell down some of those cracks, and we didn't want anyone else to do the same. So that's why we then later created My Surrogacy Journey.
So did you always know that you wanted to go down the surrogacy route, or was it through the research you did?
Yeah, always. And I'm, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that adoption wasn't a decision or an option for us. We just didn't look at it. Surrogacy was always the way we wanted to family build, and I kind of make no apologies for that. You know, that's what we wanted to do. And you know, heterosexual people don't get questioned about their family building options. So often people do question us, and I'm of the opinion, well, I don't ask a heterosexual person why haven't they adopted, and that's why I'm adamant on, you know, surrogacy was right for us, and that's why we chose it. And I also don't think I'm strong enough to do an adoptive journey. I think it's really grueling and tough, and I admire anyone that goes through it. And I don't think that at that time I was strong enough to do that.
You mentioned Caroline before, so she was your gestational surrogate, is that right?
She was.
And then you had two separate donors.
Correct. So she was gestational, so obviously not genetically linked to our children, but she carried both of our kids full term. And then we had two separate egg donors because we made mistakes. So it meant our children aren't genetically linked, which at the beginning was devastating. But we very quickly realised that it's not the genetics that actually matter. But that was something that we made a huge mistake in the beginning, and we try and educate people better when creating embryos, that try and do that in all one go if you can.
Okay. So with the two egg donors, and I'm guessing they're anonymous, and then with Caroline, how did you actually find Caroline in the first place?
So our egg donor, one is anonymous and one is known to us.
Right.
But in fairness, in finding Caroline, it's a lot of people look at finding your surrogate quite similar to dating, really. You know, we wanted to, obviously surrogacy is built on trust and friendship in the UK. So it's important that you're all on the same page and you get to know each other and you don't rush into it. So we obviously wanted someone that wanted to do this on their terms and, you know, isn't pushed or coerced into it, because that's not what surrogacy is anyway in the UK. But it was about having been us all being aligned, you know, as humans, as friends, because she's going to be in our life forever. So we obviously wanted someone that was kind. It didn't really matter where they were from or their background. She had her own children and she'd completed her family. So that was important to us because we wanted to make sure that all of those potential risks were covered off. And yeah, she was not from where we live. She was based in the north. And when we found Caroline, so Caroline messaged us actually, and reached out to us to say, look, I'd love to chat. I like your story. I'd love to be a surrogate. And we just took it from there. And we spent about 9 months building a friendship up before we began treatment, which is a lot longer than most people do. But we wanted to be really sure. But, you know, we all very quickly fell in love with Caroline and her husband. And it was clear that she was the one to help build our family.
That's lovely. And I'm guessing you keep in touch with her now.
Yeah, we speak. We've got the same WhatsApp group we've always had, and you know, she sees the kids 3-4 times a year, birthdays and Christmases too. So yeah, she's massively in our life.
That is so nice. And I guess when you were getting to know her, from a professional point of view, is there anybody that gets involved to give you like emotional support and like prepare you for like the emotions that you might feel as you then embark on the pregnancy and how you guys are going to feel?
Mm-hmm. No, and that's one of the things. So you have implications counselling through your clinic if you do gestational surrogacy. but we were doing independent surrogacy as well. So apart from implications counselling, we had nothing. And that was one of the big reasons of what prompted us to do something more around counselling, because when you're also a non-biological non-birthing parent, that's a whole cluster of issues that no one prepares you for. And we struggled, both me and Wes struggled independently with separate pregnancies when we weren't biologically linked, because people hadn't prepared us for what that was going to feel like, or how excluded you would feel, or how improper language, or how a healthcare professional might refer to you as, well, you're not the real dad. And these were all things that happened to us. And when you hear that and you're already quite sensitive to it, for me, it took me down a very dark path soon after Duke was born. And again, no one prepared me for that. So when we created My Surrogacy Journey, all of our intended parents and surrogates and their partners get 10 hours worth of Beaker accredited fertility counselling that guides them through the entire journey, both post-transfer, pre-birth, post-birth, because it's a real, you know, it messes with your mind, and no one prepares you for parenthood anyway, but no one prepares you for surrogacy, and especially when you're not genetically linked to the child. It's a real challenge.
And I bet it's something that you don't really want to admit to each other when you're going through it, like feel guilty and all kinds of things.
Yeah, me and Wes never spoke about it, and it wasn't until Duke was born, and he's our 2-year-old, that I was like, I need help. I need to talk to my doctor, because I feel really low, and I'm resenting this pregnancy and this child and my marriage, and I felt awful saying it, but no one was talking about male postnatal depression, and I really struggled, and I would be triggered by people telling me that Duke looked like Wes, and that's gorgeous because he does, and that's my son, but I was really hurt by the fact that he didn't look like me, and I would overcompensate by telling people that I was his dad as well. And these were our friends, and they knew that. They would look at me like I was going crazy. They were like, we know you're his dad, Mike. And I'm like, yeah, no, but, you know, he's going to have these traits of mine. They were like, calm down, we get it. But I was so obsessed with the genetics that I didn't have that enough was enough, because it was impacting my marriage. And for the sake of my marriage, I had to get support, because no one was telling me that this is normal, but I just wish I was prepared for it a bit more. And Wes felt the same, but he's a Cancerian. He just bottles everything up and just never told me. But yeah, it was a huge deal for us.
I bet. So obviously there's that struggle, which you're quite open about, but then in terms of like connecting with Caroline and the pregnancy, like how do you get to did you get to attend all the scans and all things like that? How were the NHS services with you?
So we were there at every scan and every appointment, because that's we wanted to be present. That's why we wanted to do surrogacy in the UK and not go to the States or Canada. So we were there for the embryo transfer, we were there for our 12-week, we were there for our 20-week, and we had additional scans throughout. And we were absolutely present for that. What that meant was when Caroline and we all turned up to the unit ready for a scan, Caroline would be called, her husband would get up, I would get up, and Wes would get up. So we would walk into a room, and quite often, initially in the early days, the response was, no, only the real dad's allowed in here, and that's what we were faced with. So that didn't sit very comfortably with us. So we obviously had to educate people. It's not always great to do in a crowded room when you've got all of these other people watching, thinking, why is that woman going in with 3 men? So that we got some funny looks. But the upside of this is that we ended up helping every single NHS trust rewrite their policy with regards to ultrasound scanning, and allowing intended parents and the surrogates partner to all be present, because it's important that our surrogate had her husband with her, because why shouldn't she? But it was also important that both parents, we're not birthing partners, we're parents, that we also see that heartbeat for the first time, that we also see the same things that any other new intended parent gets to see. We wanted to have those firsts too. So that didn't exist in 2015, 2016. So by us campaigning for a more effective policy, we rewrote that with the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England to include intended parents and surrogates and their partners in the entire process, which was great, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I guess when you were at the birth itself as well,
Yeah.
how were the midwives with you, and how did they include you at that moment?
Well, the birth was along our journey. There were a number of things that we had to compromise on.
Right.
And Caroline was having an elective cesarean. That's what she wanted. She had 4 complicated births and couldn't have a vaginal birth, so had to have a cesarean. That was her choice, and we supported that. And because that was going into surgery, the hospital were like, look, you can have a room right next to the surgery, and her husband, because we wanted him there, can bring you your baby. And the idea was that Dave would tell us whether we had a boy or a girl, and he would bring our baby into us, because we wanted him a part of the process too, because he supported Caroline throughout. So that was one of the compromises that we had to have, that we wouldn't see our children being born. But what happened was, when we were in our side room, Caroline was taken into theatre, and Caroline was all prepped, and then the moment came when Dave came into the room, and he wasn't holding a baby, and we were like, is everything okay? What's your heart's here. And he was like, get some scrubs on, because the theatre manager and consultant want you to see your baby being born.
Oh.
So, and I get goosebumps every time I say it.
Me too, I just got them then.
And they were like, hurry up and get some scrubs on, because you can't miss the birth of your child. So we ran, and I always get really teary. We ran into theatre, threw on some scrubs, and we watched Tallulah being welcomed into the world, literally wriggled out, smack on 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced, because not only did we fall in love more with Caroline and Dave, but we just saw our child being born, and that was an experience. And because of that, we further went back to NHS England and said, you can't let intended parents miss this, because we're not birth partners, which is how the previous policy treated us. And we've managed to change that too, so that intended parents, even if it's a cesarean, the surrogate can have their partner, but also have the intended parents present. So we never get to miss a birth again. And when we had Duke at the same hospital, right from the get-go, it was made note that we will be in theatre to see our child being born.
Wow. I mean, I think that's going to be music to a lot of people's ears who are listening, who are worried about all that kind of thing and feeling disconnected. So incredible that you managed to change that and make sure that all the policies are in place.
Thank you. Good achievement. Well, probably one of our proudest, actually, because every parent should see their child being born. And I know COVID has been really unfair, that many people weren't allowed, and that makes me really sad. So, but intended parents were always excluded from seeing their child being born if it was through a cesarean. So we wanted to help make that step a little bit more comfortable for people, and easier, and more inclusive, regardless of who you are. Everyone should see their child being born.
Oh, you're making a lot of people emotional.
Oh, just saying, sorry.
I'm 3 weeks pregnant, so I'm hormonal anyway. I'm like,
oh. Amazing.
Thank you. So obviously you said that the relationship with Caroline and her husband just strengthened after all of that, and you say that they see the kids like 4 times a year.
Yeah.
How have you explained how Tallulah and Duke came to be?
It's really cute, actually, because Tallulah's of an age where she understands it. She knows she grew in Caroline's tummy, because me and other daddy we don't have those parts to grow a baby. And she is a real, Tallulah's such an ambassador for where she grew and how she grew. So that's wonderful. So she understands fully that Caroline grew them both. And when the time was right, she handed us over to me and Wes. And then we took over to take care of them. So T gets it. And we've got some amazing books. There's a book called Robot Babies, which is a really good book around about IVF and people that don't have all the working parts to make a family. So that's a really good one. There's some really other good surrogacy books that we've read to the kids too. Duke's a little bit young, but he knows that it came from Caroline's tummy. Tallulah, though, she actually thought for a while that Caroline grew every surrogate baby. So when she met another child, I know. So when she met another child on holiday that their parents had a surrogate, Tallulah was like, oh, "Did you grow in Caroline's tummy?" And we were like, all right, to the next level of the conversation, let's start. Caroline's not the only surrogate. So that was quite cute. But yeah, we're obviously open and honest with the kids with how they came into the world. And I think that's the right thing for the welfare of any child, is to understand fully how you were created.
And I think that'll be really refreshing for the parents who Tallulah goes to school with, because she's educating all their kids in the best way possible. That's
exactly what, like the school WhatsApp group that we've got, the amount of messages that we get, and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. We, not only can we talk about families that have two daddies or two mummies, that we can also talk about that surrogacy exists and what is surrogacy, rather than the stupid stuff you see in Coronation Street or on Hollyoaks, that's not reflective of what surrogacy is. So that's really interesting, that children are learning about different types of families because of Tallulah.
Definitely. Well, you've given us an amazing insight, but for anybody that is listening that is thinking about going down this route, what would your best bit of advice be to them?
So surrogacy it's not a sprint. And if you're joining it as a heterosexual person, you're joining it from loss and infertility. And that hurts my heart. If you're joining it from an LGBTQ point of view, then it's often the first point, and it's celebratory and it's fun and exciting. So just sit with it, bear with it, get support and speak to the right people. The gov.uk website has a great load of information on there. And equally, head to mysurrogacyjourney.com, and there's a load of information there where you can read more information.
That's fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to include that link in a write-up of our live we're going to put on our blog, and we're also going to share this on our grid straight afterwards. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and best of luck with everything.
Oh, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the sunshine.
Thank you. You too. Take care.